And on to our legislative coverage. State lawmakers are considering a bill, Senate Bill 108, which aims to block a transmission project delivering electricity from Texas to Mississippi. If the measure passes, residents could see potentially higher utility bills.
This is a bill to protect Louisiana landowners.
Senate State Senator Alan Seabaugh authored Senate Bill 108 to prohibit expropriation for transmission projects not primarily serving the Pelican State. Expropriation, according to Merriam-Webster, means to take away or deprive property or property rights. In this case, SB 108 would deny transmission projects from taking over the property of private landowners.
Simply says that if a company is trying to build an electric transmission line that has absolutely no benefit to the state of Louisiana whatsoever, they have to lease the property from willing landowners, and they cannot avail themselves of the expropriation process.
According to the Louisiana Illuminator, SB 108 would affect Pattern Energy's Southern Spirit Transmission Project. The project, although mainly serving Mississippi, benefits Louisiana through the Mid-Continent Independent System Operator Grid, or MISO grid.
And what is this going to do exactly? Because power is generally nationwide.
While Senator Seabaugh argues the bill would protect Louisiana, critics fear unintended consequences.
It has been suggested that if this were to pass, this could have severe economic consequences because it could stand in the way of these projects happening, up to the tune of $2 billion.
There isn't a benefit for this bill to move forward. The only individual who would benefit from this bill moving forward is the landowner who requested the legislator to bring this bill. Unfortunately, that means that an awful lot of Louisianans will be missing out, if this were to go through, on lower cost power.
Logan Burke is the executive director of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. The alliance represents residential electric ratepayers across the state. She says without projects like the Southern Spirit Line and other transmission expansion, Louisiana will continue to pay more for our energy than we need to.
The U.S. Department of Energy has made it clear that there is insufficient transmission and has actually encouraged specific investment in what they call the Delta region, which includes Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi.
Burke says the benefit of this particular project with Pattern Energy is an opportunity to access lower cost wind and solar energy from Texas.
Being able to access this energy via the MISO market will be a benefit to all of us.
Despite concerns, Senator Seabaugh says this bill would solely prohibit the expropriation process.
Just find a path from willing landowners who are willing to lease it to you and go around them. Because what they're doing is they're negotiating with landowners, and when the landowner says, this land has been in my family for 3 generations, I don't want a big overhead power line going through my front yard, they're saying fine, and then they can use the expropriation process.
The measure is now headed to the House Committee on Civil Law and Procedure.